My name is Rob Roberts. I was born and raised in the south side of Los Angeles. And when I turned 18 in May, graduated high school in June, and went in the Navy in July of 1981, and spent 20 years, 3 months and 11 days roughly in the Navy. And I've been over a large chunk of the world. It's 16 of my 20 years was sea duty. And I did 5 trips to the Persian Gulf, and 2 of those trips were during Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And that's how I became a member of the VFW. And now I live in Wisconsin. I enlisted in, I believe, 1976 is when the draft ended. And when I turned 18, I still had to register as selective service. And that was, and is, something that all men have to do now when they turn 18. You just go to the post office and fill out some paperwork. Funny to that, I enlisted and I was on delayed entry for 10 days, meaning I enlisted and I would be leaving for boot camp in 10 days. And during that period of time, I got a phone call from the Marine Corps at my house saying they'd like to talk to me about joining the Marine Corps. And I said, well, sorry, but I've already joined the Navy. So it's kind of humorous that it occurred after I'd been down there. So one of them I consider a joke. We got to San Diego. I went from Los Angeles to San Diego on a bus, and we got there very late, probably, I suspect, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And we were ushered in and getting yelled at, screamed at, the whole 9 yards, to move here, move there, do this, do that, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we went to finally go to bed. You know, it was, you know, running your butt off to go everywhere you were going at the first few days. And we finally got to bed, and you're in a barracks, and it's a big hallway or a big open room area with 3-tier racks. And the next morning, and I suspect it was like 2 hours of sleep at best, somebody came in and took one of the large metal trash cans and threw it down the middle of all these racks, and it's crash, boom, bang, et cetera, et cetera. And I tell people I looked for 20 years, 3 months, and 11 days for that guy that threw that trash can. It's a rude awakening. You make friends quick, and then when you go get your hair cut and you get issued a uniform and everything, you don't recognize the people that you went in with. For example, I had hair down to about here when I went into boot camp. And when they remove it, it's gone. I mean, you've got about yay much hair. There's no bothering with a comb or anything else. It was hustle everywhere you go. It was drills for days. It was working your butt off, but it wasn't as bad as some people make it seem. If you can follow direction and you actually have a little bit of common sense when they say turn left, not turn right. And believe it or not, a lot of it is still stuck with me. I mean, the way I tie my shoes, the way I wear, you know, my clothes and stuff like that, there's habits that you just carry with you for the rest of your life. Matter of fact, I still have a pen in my pocket no matter where I go or what I do, so. I was stationed in San Diego on one ship, and then I transferred to another ship in Northern California, Alameda, and then I went back to San Diego at Coronado where the SEALs and Marines are trained. I am not a SEAL, I'm not a Marine, or not a SEAL or a diver. They're the ones that get trained down there, but I got to experience some of what they go through just because I was in the proximity and got to see things and so on. I was a welder, pipe fitter, and firefighter in the Navy. So I went a lot of places for repair stuff. Was at Coronado, went back to Alameda, and once I was done there, I went back to San Diego and I was teaching. Those are the Coronado and when I was teaching are the 2 times I was on shore duty. And when I was teaching in San Diego, there was a thing, an occurrence called BRAC, base realignment and closure. And they were aligning bases and combining bases and closing bases and so on. And they said, well, you're gonna go to Great Lakes, you're going back to sea duty. And like I said, I had 16 years of sea duty. So I said, what the heck, I'll try Great Lakes. Never had been up here, never been in this kind of snow or cold weather in my life, but actually enjoyed it up here. And my wife and I bought a house up here. I went to Pensacola, Florida for a while, Pascagoula, Mississippi for a little while. And then I went back to Alameda, Northern California, and then back to San Diego. And I retired out of San Diego. But I've been Singapore, Hong Kong, Seychelles Islands, Guam, Persian Gulf, Bahrain, Jebel Ali, Dubai, Japan, I don't know how many times, Hawaii, all over the Orient, basically. Thailand, Malaysia, just all over the place. And good life experiences. Probably the brotherhood, and I don't necessarily mean just men brotherhood, but the service member brotherhood. There's an unwritten bond. I can joke with a Marine, and it's a joke. It's nothing personal or anything else, but if something were to happen, without a doubt, I know that person would be at my shoulder, side by side. The first aid that I do, that I've done, that I've fortunately or unfortunately been in the right place at the wrong time several times. I had, because I was a firefighter in my rank, I had basic life support training, which in the military is significant. I was a ballast control officer, and for what I was doing, I was in charge of loadout to make sure the ship is balanced and not, leaning one side or the other, as well as you sink the ship to kick the Marines out. And that's something people really don't realize, that, there is a system where the ship goes like this, the Marines go out the back, and the ship comes back up. So I got to do that, and that was kind of neat. But I think one of the most significant things that I took out of the military, and I tried to impart in my kids, and it worked, that I try to impart in any of today's youth is you're a lot more privileged, you're a lot luckier, you're a lot better off than you really believe. We pulled into Malaysia, and we were doing an operation, and we were picking up the Malaysian Marines, and we dropped off our construction battalion Seabees. And the Seabees went, and the SEALs went and made a beachhead, and then we went out to sea for 3-4 days, and after that 3-4 days, we do a beach landing with our Marines and their Marines, or Army, or whatever they had for military in that country. And when we came back, it took us a while to pull into port because an ox barge had hit the pier and sank. And apparently this happened right after we had left. When we got back, a couple days later, ox are starting to float to the surface. Nobody was there to clean anything up. The barge was still there, et cetera. And I was watching people strip down to just their underwear and jumping in the water, cutting a chunk of ox and throwing it up to their family. And we in this country, that's not even remotely thought process. It's amazing to see a family of 4 on a moped in another country, where people today get upset because they don't have their cell phone, or they don't have that pretty car that they want, or they don't have this, or they don't have that. And I'd like to explain to my kids and they're older now, obviously, but they grew up having wants, but not having needs. And there's a significant difference. A need would be clothing. A need would be a roof over your head. A need would be have food tonight. You know, when I'm watching these people dive in the water to cut a chunk of ox, that's a need for them. And it's an amazing thing to see that we in this country are so privileged and so lucky, but people don't have the compassion, consideration, understanding of what they really have, of what really is necessary in life. So that process is rough, believe it or not. I was working for a company and I was a supervisor, and they were brazing and soldering some of the stuff I did in the military. And the machine shop had made some parts that didn't fit. They were out of tolerances. So I had taken them back to supply and gotten another box. Well, the QA guy came out and told me to do this, use these parts. And I says, you can't use these parts. You know, why should I put all the rework on my people? And he went off and said, you're not in the military anymore. Well, part of my job in the military was QA, quality assurance. I said, you're right. I'm not in anymore, but my ID card never expires. And so that ended up in a little pissing contest. And my crew was like, wow, somebody's standing up for us. Well, yeah, I took a long time ago put in my head, as long as I take care of my people are going to take care of me. And that's a legitimate thing if you're out in the workforce. And then I had been told at my 6-month mark that I would be getting a raise. Well, 7th month, 8th month, and I start asking questions of the plant manager. And I said I would like to speak to the district manager. And the plant manager says, if you talk to him and tell him what's going on, I'll call you a liar. I said, sir, that's one thing I'm not. And I clocked out and left my job. My integrity is something you have integrity. The only way you can lose it is give it away, and you'll never get it back. And it sounds like a minimal word, but it is significant to me. I take my integrity very highly. I think that's underdeveloped out here in the civilian world for a lot of employers and employees. I used to think that, some of the places I worked, people would clock in, take their brain out, put it on the shelf, and then when they clocked out, pick the brain up, put it back in, and go home. And, not everybody's like that, but I think it's funny because my son is just now turning 30, and he's made the comment to me that, Dad, people don't have a work ethic out here. Well, then I raised you the right way, kid, so. That's a kind of a two-pronged question in the sense of the military is going to change. People don't realize the military is society's testing grounds. For example, if you look through history and everything else, the military was integrated with black men and women and so on long before society accepted it. So the military was the testing site for that. But the other thing, the military has to grow. The military has to mature. The military has to stay with the times. So my view on it, I think they've gotten lax in certain areas, but at the same time, they've had to. Because kids today, and I say kids that are 18, kids today would not have tolerated, accepted where I was in the early 80s. When I first came in, my first 3 ships did not have air conditioning in the racks, in your sleeping bunks. And my last ship had air conditioning. It was something completely different to me, new to me. And it's gotten more towards a little bit more of the creature comforts. It's not just a, battle wagon, but it's a ship that men and women serve on that live there, so it's, like I said, it's a double-edged sword. Some of the stuff I think should be a little bit more stern, or I don't mean aggressive, but more in tune with, what your function is to be in the military. But at the same time, it had to change, otherwise people wouldn't go in. So I was around and old enough to see when Vietnam veterans came back. And they were treated like, for lack of better words, they were treated like crap. My uncle was a Vietnam veteran. And that dude was over the top proud of me for going in, which was cool to me. I was in the Gulf, in Bahrain, watching the parades after Desert Shield and Desert Storm was done. And it was like, okay, that's nice, but it was kind of heartbreaking because I was still there and the war's not over and the BS that's going on isn't over. But I think the biggest thing that needs to happen for veterans, two biggest things, is for society not to be afraid of us. I actually went to college after I got out, and the instructor knew me. It was an introduction course, and the instructor knew me. And he asked the class, what do you think of veterans? And people are like, they all have PTSD. They're all dangerous to be around, this, that, and the other. And then he asked me to stand up. And typical, I was in the back of the class, being able to look at the door. There's certain habits we have. And it's funny because we all have it. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, you're more protected in this classroom with that man there than you are anywhere else. Because every one of you is going to run away if something happens, and he's going to be the one running in front of everything happening. And I wish people would understand that. It's not that we're trained that way as much as it is a lifestyle now. We are the ones, man, woman, it doesn't matter in the military, where when defecation connects with the rotary oscillator, shit hits the fan, and other people are going the opposite direction, we're the ones going towards the problem. Like I said, with my basic life support, there's quite a few people still around in this world because of things I've done, like going into burning buildings and so on. Other people drove by. I stopped at 6 o'clock in the morning to find out what the heck was going on with all this smoke coming out of this building. I also hope that the VA system for medical care, disability, et cetera, gets better, because I had to fight for 5 years because I have cancer. And it took the VA 5 years to figure out, oh, yeah, it's legitimate. Well, yeah, duh. So those are the two things I really, for the military, as far as veterans, would be more inclusive and, happening. So there was a restaurant, it's still there, on Sheridan Road called The Village. And I was driving by there one morning and I had my Bluetooth on. I was talking to my wife because I was headed down south to go to work. And I happened to look over at the Village and there was a lot of smoke in the south side of their parking lot. And I was like, that's not normal. So I spun around, I told my wife, I said, call the fire department. I think this restaurant's on fire. So I started beating on doors and everything, and I'd been to the restaurant. I knew it was a restaurant and everything else. What I didn't know, and I did it anyway, is I went to a back stairway and beat on a door, and this kid, about 20 years old, has a pair of shorts on, rubbing his eyes, and goes, what's up, man? I said, you need to get the hell out of here now. Your building's on fire. And I said, do you have roommates? And he says, yeah. So I went in and cleared all the rooms. Well, what that is open up the door, look around, open up the door slowly so you're not going to get burned if something comes out. But look around, see if anybody's there, get them up and get them out. Well, I went to one room and I cleared the building, but I went to one room and I could see black smoke in the ceiling and there's a certain smell to an electrical fire. And I was like, oh, damn, we need to get out of here now because it's a toxic smell. Fast forward, I had left one of the policemen my card, and fast forward, I get called by the Pleasant Prairie Police Department. They would like to speak to me. Okay, they want to interview me about the fire. I'm fine with that. And I took my daughter, and she was a mouse at the time. And I wanted her to understand that police departments and those types of people aren't a threat, So she went in with me, and there's the police officer asking me questions, and there's a younger gentleman sitting next to him. And the police officer's asking me questions and so on. I'm answering them and everything. And he goes, do you know where the fire was? And I said, it was on the west side of the building on the second floor, but it was in the attic and it was an electrical fire. And he drops his pen and he says, how do you know that? I said, I was a firefighter in the Navy for 20 years. There's a significant smell to an electrical fire. And when I opened the door and cleared the room, I could see the black in the ceiling and stuff. And he looks at me and he goes, that's still under investigation. I was like, wow, okay, because the building had been leveled just about. I was like, okay, I hope I helped. And I looked at the younger guy, because I was done with the interview. I said, how do I know you? He goes, Mr. Rob, it's nice to see you practice what you preach. Okay, nobody's called me Mr. Rob in quite some time. How do I know you? He said, you taught me first aid at a Klondike. And he had made Eagle Scout and he was going to be a police officer. I was like, damn, that's cool because it came full circle. And then the police officer talked to my daughter and he says, your dad has a secret identity. And she goes, yeah, we know. There's about 10 people alive because of him. And I was like, okay, that was out of she heard that from my wife or something. And the police officer goes, we do know who he is though. And he's got a refrigerator back here with Mountain Dews and Snickers bars. Do you want some? To me, that was an epitome of everything I've done with Scouts. You don't realize that your influence when this kid may be this big, may be a significant influence when they're 22, 24, 26 years old. And I've had a few experiences like that. So I get a kick out of watching the younger kids growing up to being really productive adults. And it's awesome to watch. And I tell the parents all the time, don't let the little stuff go. Let them go. Let them enjoy this because they're going to pick stuff up and you'll never even realize it.